Hi, I'm Raymond, and I want to share with you my now 61 years of sailing and racing a sea-view dinghy, and show you how I set it up, how I rig it for each race, and a couple of pointers on how to sail it well. So it's going to be in 3 parts. So for part 1, I want to show you how I set the boat up before I let anybody else launch it. The first thing is to get your mast up straight, because otherwise it'll be different on each tack. If you want it straight, the easiest way to do it is to take your main halyard, do it up, and then take it very slowly, pulling gently on the halyard until it hits the side of the gunnel. And if you look there, you'll see I'm hitting about 1 centimetre, 1 inch behind the rudder hole. So I take it around the other side and I'm pulling the same as I go. I keep the same tension on it. And when I get and I touch, I'm touching in exactly the same place, about 1 inch behind the rudder hole. That tells me that my mast is straight up. First important thing. Second thing, you want to have a look at your hole in the thwart and decide year on year where you want the mast in the hole. Now, it's no good me showing you mine, because some of them are in the middle, some are at the front, some are at the back. I happen to be at the back. That's just chance. Then you will get your mast up the same every year. The next thing I'm going to do is set up my sails and the ropes in the boat. Starting from the front, I set up the jib. Now the jib comes with an eye at the bottom, but it's too close to the boat to get any shape, and you want this up so the bottom of the jib is roughly level with the bottom of your sail. That gives you more effective slot, it's called, so that the sail overlaps the mainsail. I use a piece of string, and it's about a long finger and a bit in distance, without doing measurements, because the measurement isn't the important thing. The important thing is the shape that you get in the sail. And then how to pull it up tight. Here it is just pulled up to keep it, and if you hold the sail and the forestay and I pull, you'll see that the sail is much looser than the forestay. The rigging isn't very tight. You don't need very tight rigging in a sea-view dinghy. It makes a nice low bunking noise. Ding ding, you're going to push your keel out of the bottom of the boat. They're not strong enough. So I pull up my jib halyard, and when I pull up my jib halyard, I go and I sit on the stern and I pull with 2 hands. I'm quite strong. By the time I've done that, my jib is tighter than my forestay. My jib is tighter than my forestay. My forestay is bending more than the jib. And that's my basic setting. If it's windy, I want it tight. I want it very tight. So I pull on my rack. I pull it up tighter. And now my jib is way tighter than my forestay. That's setting it up for more wind. So we've put the jib in the boat, but we haven't done the setting of the pulleys. How do we do that? Here are the original 1961 pulley blocks from my boat. You do not need anything fancy or expensive. Now, the important thing here is what shape I'm going to get in the bottom of the jib. And by having simple rope each side attached to the side of the boat, you can slide this backwards and forwards before or after or during a race. And that allows you to decide, when you pull the jib in, what shape you have in the bottom of the jib. Now, there's no wind here to show you, but broadly speaking, in light weather, I have it right at the front. And that allows me to get a shape in the jib that looks nice and round. Air does not flow in straight lines. Wind likes to go around corners to generate power. So if you don't have any shape, you don't have any power. If you have your jib pulling in at the bottom so hard that you get this wrinkle, it's not giving you anything at all except windage. Can't show you exactly where without the wind in it. So that's how you set up your jib. Don't pull it in too tight. Every single rope on the boat that you have to adjust in my boat is calibrated. So here, on my jib sheet, I have a black mark. So that when I pull my jib in and I work out where I want it for today, I can see where the black mark is. So I know when I go on my first tack, I look and see that I've got a nice shape in the bottom. In light wind, I want more shape than in heavy wind. If I move it back, I don't know if you can see, but that makes it flat at the bottom. It goes flat. That's for heavy wind. So in light wind, there's my marker. Every time I tack, I can put it in the same place without thinking about it. I do my tack, it's there. Same on the other side, of course. The marker is on the same rope in the same place, so that the two sides will be identical. I haven't got to set it up on both sides. That's basically and simply how the jib works. Let's have a look at the mainsail over here. The mainsail works in exactly the same way. Broadly speaking, light wind, pull up everything lightly. Heavy wind, pull up everything tightly. Very simple mnemonic. So, I've opted to rig my boom the same as an oppie. Now, most of you parents out there will be rigging oppies till you're blue in the face. Why don't you copy something as simple as this, with strands round? Because if you have a lacing all the way around, it tends to pull the boom down, the sail down tight against the boom, and if it lets it go in some places but not in others. If you have it like this, then the bottom of the sail, you can see, it flows round the boom. It flows very nicely and it's not caught anywhere. So that gives you a nice even shape at the bottom of the boom. However, you do need to have it held down very tightly at the main sheet end. So there it is, you can't get your fingernail between the sail and the boom. That keeps the boom away from your head, quite important. And then as far as pulling in and out, you can adjust it, again, just like the jib. In light wind, you want to have some shape in the sail. Broadly speaking, according to your weight, when you're sitting on the side of the boat, you start to make it tighter. And when you're stressed and you're leaning out hard, you want it very tight. And that doesn't apply just to this. It applies to your halyards, it applies to your kicker, it applies to your jib halyard, everything. Heavy wind, make it tight. Light wind, make it light. And the balancing point, according to your own weight, is whether you're sitting out hard or not. Main halyard. How many of you tie a complicated knot at the top? Anybody had it come undone? How many of you have a great big metal hook at the top, which weighs a ton and flogs around at the top of your mast? You don't need a hook, you need a bobble. The smallest one you can get your rope through and tie a knot in the end. You put a loop through the top of the main, quite tight. You put the bobble through the loop and you pull it tight. It weighs nothing, it can't slip, and it can't come down. And it's absolutely the ideal way of holding up a mainsail on this boat and many others. Now, the next thing that's important about your boat is the sliders. Look how my sliders go up and down. There's no friction there, there's no varnish or paint or corrosion on my track. You do that very simple. You take a fingerful of Vaseline and you run it up the track at the beginning of the season. And since tomorrow is the Worlds, I did it again yesterday because it was getting a bit sticky. That way, when you adjust the halyard, the sail adjusts the whole way up and down and not just at the top few inches tighter. So there's my main ready to go up. Exactly the same process. I pull it up and then I come and I sit on my stern seat and I give it a good pull. I'm strong, it goes pretty tight. So then I can go and I can have a look at the sail and I can decide here how tight it is. And you can see I have to pull quite hard to make any impression. And I would call that my average set. If there's no wind at all and I'm wanting to creep my boat along the shore, which I love doing, then I'll make it quite loose, and you can feel here, I only had to put a finger on it and it'll bounce. It's the same with the foot. This foot is loose. It's hanging, if you can see on the film, the sail is hanging down beside and there's no weight in it at all. If it's windier, I can pull that up on this double ratchet system until it's completely tight, very simply. But that is only when I'm sitting out and holding on for dear life. Mostly I have it loose because, as I said before, wind goes round corners, not straight lines. You're going to get hit with that boom. So, we've done the mainsail setup. Now, let's have a quick look inside the boat. Two things inside the boat, which perhaps I should have done when I was doing boat setup. You put your oars inside the boat. How many of you have your oars like that? How many of you have fallen over and tripped on your oars or got in the way when you are tacking? Because believe me, you put them there, they are completely in the way. Very simple solution. High technology. A bit of elastic attached to the seat in a loop. Put the oar in it, pull it forwards, and the oar never appears in your sailing area. Same with the ropes. All these ropes lying here, they're going to be in the way. Make a loop, put them around the halyard, and put them out of the way. And the mainsail, that's where I keep my bucket. So I make a bundle, and I get my bucket. Anybody else seen a bucket like this? Square bucket? Well, if you want to bail your boat, and you've got lots of water in, what good is a round bucket? If you have a square bucket, it fits along the bottom of the boat and picks up all the water. Get a square bucket. Because also, it fits under the seat. Most buckets don't. Take your rope, put it in the bucket, get rid of the tail. That gives you a tidy boat for sailing in. So what else do you need when you're sailing to make life more comfortable? Well, once this year, I was on my way out to the start, and there was this gentle plopping noise, and the piece of shackle fell out, the pin fell out of my shackle, and I was left with no mainsail attached. But I always carry a spare shackle on a bit of rope in the boat, because almost anything that breaks on a Seaview dinghy, you can fix with 2 shackles and a bit of rope. That way, I go out to sail in the Wells tomorrow, the chances are, anything goes wrong, I can fix it. Because I also have a pair of pliers and some sticky tape, and my pen for marking ropes, and a spare course pencil, and some Vaseline for the halyards. So that lives under the back all summer in a bag. The other thing that people get happening to them is when they jibe, they have their rudder in, of course, with a tiller, and you have this great big metal pin that goes through and has a nice big chunk sticking out the other side. So just occasionally, once or twice a year, you'll jibe and it gets stuck on the chunk sticking out the other side. Can be quite disastrous in heavy wind. You could even go for a swim. So what do? You get rid of this nasty piece of metal. You take a piece of ordinary rope, you make it a bit stiff, dip it in some varnish, and that'll hold your rudder in just as well as any hard, heavy pin. Hasn't come out for me in 60 years. So, while we're talking about marking ropes, let me show you that I even mark my main sheet. Now, one of the key things that you have to do before the start of any race is to try and work out which end of the start line you'd like to be. There are several ways of doing that, and some people like to go head to wind on the start line, and then as they get across the start line head to wind, they look down each side of the boat and decide which end of the line is upwind. Well, Our start lines are pretty busy, there's lots of boats on them, and if it's rough, you can't stay head to wind in a sea beginning more than about 2 seconds, and you're never quite sure where it's head to wind because the boom's flopping around. So, it doesn't take very long to work out when you are sailing along once that there is a certain point on your sail setting which, when you tack and go the other way, exactly cross the wind, the main sheet doesn't need any adjusting. So you have to spend a bit of time experimenting on that. But when you get it, have a look at your main sheet and mine, and if you look very closely near the block, there's a black mark. I have black marks on everything, I told you. So I know that when that black mark is there, and my sail is perfectly setting, I'm going exactly across the wind. And lo and behold, if I go down the start line the other way, and my boom's out the other side, and the mark's in the same place, that start line is exactly square. And if it's pulled in, beyond, that shows I'm going upwind, and that is the direction I want to be going at that end of the line when the start comes. Generally. You've got to think about the tide and the other competitors and all sorts of other rubbish, but that's a good way and an easy way without being technical and trying to go head to wind on the start line. Then, of course, you've got to know where the start line is. And that's a challenge that all of us face every day. Not always easy. The other thing that, of course, don't be surprised, I've got a black mark on it. It's my kicker. Perfectly ordinary kicker. And when I pull my kicker in, can you see in the boat there's a black mark? There's a black mark appeared in the boat. It's just gone through that bottom block. That's loose. And if I want my kicker tight, I can pull it all the way to there. And if you look, you can't probably see that my boom is actually bent in the process. It is so tight. Now, don't often sail with it up there, partly because I can't get under the boom anymore. In the old days, I used to sail with it very tight in heavy weather. So exactly the same as your main halyard, your main sheet, your jib. Heavy wind, heavy rope, pull it tight. Light wind, light rope, leave it loose. That pretty much covers setting up the boat. I've chosen to put my jib tails on the side of the boat because otherwise, when you're sailing along, you have to reach in down here in the floor somewhere to find it, whereas I can sit on the side and I can adjust my jib without getting in and out of the boat. Now, I shouldn't be trying to teach you about how to sail the right course because I have a reputation for getting it wrong. But there's 2 ways to do it. First of all, equip yourself with China graph pencils. 2 of them. If you put them in your pocket, they'll get broken in a moment. So I have wrapped a bit of furry tape around the pencil, and I've put the hook and loop part on the boat, sticky, and I always have a pencil when I'm sitting that I can reach without going anywhere, 1 on each side. Now, I have a piece of Fablon on the front that you can get in W.H. Smith. So if I'm sitting on this side and I'm going along and the compass says 360, and then all of a sudden I look at it and the compass says 350, I'll write down 350, and that becomes my best port course. If it goes back to 360, that probably tells me I'm on a header and I need to tack. So I do a nice tack, very smooth, I go around the other side, and I come on this side, 360, 90, and I'm on this side, it's going to say another number, which I can't calculate in my head right now. And I'll write the number down here, probably 270. It'll be about 270. So 270 is my standard direction. Standard direction, suddenly it goes down. It's 260 or 250. Quick, that's a header. Take the tack and work your way up the beat, trying to stay on the ladders, not the snakes. And believe me, that sounds straightforward, but after 61 years, it's not.
So that the importance of having a compass or a tic tac, because I mean, I don't have one, and a lot of people I don't think have one either. So maybe.
if you have one, you have that extra advantage. If you don't, the only thing you can do is look at the horizon and see if you suddenly pointing one side or the other of where you were pointing, and then you can say, is that a header or is it a freer? Some people manage quite well like that. I look at the horizon constantly to tell me, am I making marks? What is my direction? It's a quick reference. But if you go around the leeward mark in a long race and you see you've got 350, and last time you went round it was 375, you can't possibly know that without a compass. And you can then decide what you do. You probably would tack straight away onto what is now a freer, but there are other things that you're going to worry about as well. But without that information, you don't have the basis to make the decision. And the tactic's very expensive. You don't need a tactic. It has a calculation system in it that can tell you all sorts of stuff I've never used. I just use the numbers. I also use the timer, because then when you're sitting in the boat looking forwards at the start line, your clock is in your line of vision. Now, you young guys, that's not a problem. You can look down at your watch and you can focus on it. My eyes don't focus too well down there. I have to look over there to get focus. So if I'm doing that for that long, I could be anywhere and then somebody could run into me. So I don't want to look down, I want to look forwards all the time. Keep my line of vision forwards. I can look at the clock and the start line and the buoy and everything else all in one field of vision. Again, it's a big investment, a couple of £100. And they don't last very long, maybe 3 or 4, 5 years. I think that's probably my whole story. We all have toe straps. You need a nice solid toe strap. It has to be your sort of length. The longer your legs, the longer you can try and sit out. Mine is lying on the floor of the boat. I have to get my toe under there or I miss it. And I have a nice loose one because I'm quite fit still and I can sit my body right out just above my knees on the side of the boat. If you have it too tight, you can't sit out. Any questions?
That's great. How often should the bottom of the boat be maintained?
I repaint mine every year. I use anti-foul. I was one of the first boats to use anti-foul because everybody said it was no good and you couldn't win a race with anti-foul, so I switched to try and lead the fleet, and I'm very happy that the fleet has followed, and now 90% of boats have anti-foul. If you want to crawl underneath and have a look, the anti-foul has been wiped with a sponge once this year, about 3 weeks ago, and there's not a sign of weed on it. So it's a good product. Make sure you've got a good product, but you have to put it on fresh every year, which is a quick rub down and one coat. Not a big deal.
So when you're sailing, when you're going upwind, where are you actually generally looking?
I'm looking at my jib. I'm looking at my woolies. I live on my woolies. I'm watching my woolies. I want my woolies to be flying. And then I want them just to dip occasionally, and I want them flying, dip occasionally, flying. That's my direction. And you've got to, I totally focused on that shape, which you see now there's a touch of wind, it's a good shape. That's the sort of shape I want in a jib. The air will flow around it nicely. So that will give me some flow over these buoys. If they're not flying, I'm not going in the right direction. You can't see the outside ones in this light, but if the outside ones are flying and the inside ones are flying, that's perfect. If the inside ones are fluttering around or dropping, you're pinching. Pinching is a serious mistake. It doesn't make you go any higher, it makes you go slower. If the outside ones are flopping around, you're not on the wind, you've got a luff. And believe me, that takes 90% of my concentration. The other percentage is on what's happening to my bows. I do not want to go flop into a wave. I want to keep my boat pointing downhill. That's a trite thing to say, it's very hard to achieve, but what you don't want is to bounce into waves, especially in all these northerly winds we've had or when it's westerly strong. You don't want to bounce into the waves, you want to steer around them, especially downwind, steer around the waves. Not easy, but a good thing to do. Where am I sitting? I'm sitting with the side of my thigh against the rudder. I can't really sit on that, it's jolly uncomfortable, but my general sitting point is with the side of my thigh on there. And that means that my weight is as far forward as I can get it, and I have a very long tiller extension, so that when I'm sitting out there, I can reach my tiller extension. My tiller is probably the maximum length that's allowed in the dinghies as well, which is longer than the standard one that comes with the boat. And I have a little clip for it that keeps it out of the way when I don't want it. Sitting downwind is the most uncomfortable thing you'll do in your life, because you have to spread your body in too many directions. The first thing you've got to do in light wind is get your foot holding the kicker, which is not too tight, to hold the boom out. The second thing is you've got to steer with the extension. The third thing is you have to have control of the main sheet. The last thing is that you want to sail your jib. So you're sitting with the centerboard right up, pulling the spare jib sheet through like this. Think flying angel. And if you don't get cramp after a couple of minutes, you're very, very fit. And after a long run, it's very hard to move. But that is the going downwind place. And what you're doing there is constantly moving your body back and forwards to keep the boat level. You don't want the boat rolling on top of you. You don't want the boat heeling. And the other thing is when you hit a wave, you don't want it to be bouncing. So I'm constantly steering my boat downwind to try and stop the bows burying into a wave. Because if you can steer downhill, you'll go faster. And if you get onto a wave, you either have to luff a little bit, bear away a little bit, so you don't bury into the next one and stop you. Now, Ben Ainslie taught the world how to bear away and go by the lead down a wave. Nobody had done it before, and it's an exhilarating feeling if you can do it without jibing. So when you get a wave, if you want to luff, there's something in the way. You can't, so you bear away down the wave, the boat leans frantically towards you, and you bring it back again before you jibe, and hold onto your foot. Great manoeuvre, good for speed, don't try it without practice. Downwind.
That's great. And then I often see your generation being able to sit in and being able to just do their fly their jib from inside the boat. So I do it exactly how you do it, but then some people are doing something like that.
I wasn't going to tell you about that.
There you go.
I have a crew member who holds my jib for me downwind. Here he is. He's hiding under the rollock there. I have a crew member who will hold my jib for me downwind, and of course there's any wind, that holds it very nicely out there.
Very good.
So I don't have to do this very difficult position too often.
And then, okay, so granted we're in the garden, but if we're on the water, the wind's obviously going to be pulling.
The wind's pulling that away.
Right. So,
perfect.
So you are then on the inside, just holding it.
No, you can't go any further. It's gone tight.
Oh, it's gone tight.
Maximum length of sheet.
Okay. And that's the important thing to point out.
Maximum length of sheet. The sheet is adjusted so that when it's sailing downwind, goose-winged, without anything done up, it's maximum length of sheet.
Brilliant.
It's not brilliant. It's simple.
Yeah, it's brilliantly simple. Yeah.
All the best things are simple.
Yeah. Great. That's awesome. Thank you so much.
Now, there's what missed.
Got one more?
I've got one more small thing for you, which I forgot to mention. I'll come around this side and I'll show you where my anchor is, because I just noticed it there. Most people, when you have your boat rigged for you, the anchor and all the ropes are sitting up here, right in the front, out of the way. And that means that every time you hit a wave or you change tack, you have this huge 2, 3, 4 kilo plus the rope weight wet inertia sitting in your bows. And when you're bouncing on a wave, you have 2, 3, 4 kilos of weight forcing you down into the wave. You don't want that. So what you want is to have your weight level with the centerboard. So my centerboard pin is back here, my centerboard is hung there, so I bring my anchor back and I sit it on the side there. It's very comfy, sits there the whole season. If I want it out, I just throw it out. It doesn't happen very often, once or twice a year, if that. And also my tow rope is there, and I think everybody now has on their mooring strop a little hook, a grab hook, so that you can have this way back down the boat over there, so when you come alongside your buoy you don't have to go anywhere, because I'm not very good at getting in front of the mast these days.